there's this auction dedicated to Lucian Treyarch collection and his wife collection, and it's not so clear to figure out all the stories about the stamps.
But it's a non-story, so I don't know how to say it. There's no story about the stamps. I just wrote a text to explain there are different studios in different
location.
Different location, of course, but between in his lives, he used to have two studios at the same time. So it has always been confused. You have this Rue Campagne Première and the Rue Val-de-Grâce during a few years at the same time. So he could use both stamps. So the story of the stamps are, of course, they are complicated. There are many stamps, but there's no, I mean, it's a nonsense. When we talk about a fake, we never talk about a fake stamp. We talk about a fake work, okay? So
no, but the problem is datation, right? It's to know when the photo was printed.
But to know when the photo was printed, you don't care about the stamp anyway, because he could stamp in the 60s prints he made in the 30s with a stamp of the 30s, okay? And he could stamp in the 60s a work printed in the 30s with a stamp made in the 60s. Like the Man Ray Paris stamp, which is a late stamp, is also on vintage prints. So it doesn't make any sense, you know. This is a nonsense discussion.
And what about what do you think about the work of Stephen Manford?
I think it's a nonsense work, because his work is talking only about stamps. When you read the book, you never know on which work is the stamp he's talking about. Have you tried to understand what he's working on? I mean, did you read the book?
No.
Okay, if you read the book, there is only a discussion about the stamps, but related to nothing. It's related to nothing. He's talking about a fake stamp, but he's saying that the fake stamp is not on a fake work. So where is the point? You know what I mean? How do you know it's a fake stamp? Because the work is true. The problem is when we talk about fake works, fake Man Rays, but there's a lot of fake Man Rays. That's why it's a pity to have such a misunderstanding about this problem of the stamps. The stamps, Man Ray made lots of different stamps. You can try to inventory all of them, which is what he did. But it's a nonsense work because he never attached the stamps to the work.
But you said there's a lot of fake Man Rays?
Yes, of course. There are a lot of fake Man Ray. There has been, everybody knows about the story of the Bockelberg collection. I was an expert for a Zanotto judge in 1999 about fake works. I mean, there are a lot of Man Ray fake, because Man Ray is an expensive artist. So if there's money to make, there are fakes. Yeah.
Okay.
But the stamp doesn't mean anything.
So it's a wrong. And so this is a widow of Lucian Treyarch who is selling all the things, right? And are you the business provider for the auction, or just an?
No, I've been working with Lucian, as I told you. I started to work with him in 1993. So I've known Madame Treyarch for a very long time, and I'm just here because she asked me to. Okay.
And how can we explain that Lucian Treyarch has so many works of Man Ray?
Because they have been very close, working together for more than 15 years, almost 20 years. For me, it's like normal thing, it's and it's also only paper.
And no, because there are some objects, right?
I know, but those objects, as you know, there were editions, and these editions were made by Lucian with Man Ray. So, I mean, it's most of the objects you have there in the auctions, most of them are prototypes. No?
And what about, what are for you the most important photo in the sale?
Erotic Voilée, Veiled Erotic, for me is the most unique series because it's the only contact series of this very, very important image, surrealist image Emmanuelle did. So Erotic Voilée is amazing. You have great portraits of Lee Miller. You have only one color print, which is pretty rare. The papillon. I don't know how we say papillon. I have a
butterfly.
Thank you. The butterflies. You have a very, very rare print of dust breeding. So dust breeding is L'Élevage de Poussière with Marcel Duchamp, and this is a print. Of course, this is not a vintage print. It's a print that was made for Lucian in 1976. So it's dedicated to Lucian Treyarch, but it's a beautiful print and it's a very rare image. So, and
what is the role of the trust, Man Ray Trust today?
Well, they only have rights, it's only a question of rights. So whenever you want to publish a Man Ray photograph, you have to ask for the rights, and the Man Ray Trust asks money.
Okay, so it's a Juliette family, right?
Exactly, because Man Ray had no children, no?
Okay, so there's no involvement in the posterity of Man Ray from the Man Ray Trust?
Yes, in a way there is, because for example, I made a show in Brazil last year, and they gave the right for the show. So I mean, it's not always a question of money. If the show was, for example, the show was free entrance, I mean, it was a free access show in Brazil for 1 year, and they didn't ask for rights.
Nice. Okay,
that was nice. So it's their role as the family is also to valorize. I don't know. On dit valoriser en français.
Valorize, why not? Yeah. That's right.
sounds okay. Valorize the Man Ray work. So okay, so most of the time what they're doing, if for museums and everything, you can have like a free, of course, when there's a book, the catalog is not free of rights. Okay, you always have some rights for a book, but that's normal. But
Heinz Berggruen wrote that in his book, the famous dealer of Picasso wrote that Man Ray didn't really have a sense of business. What do you think about that?
Well, that's interesting. I wouldn't say that, because I thought, for me, although Man Ray he was not rich, of course. When you see at the end of his life, he used to live in a very poor. The studio Rue Férou was like a very small place and not really nice and clean. So I wouldn't say he was very rich, but although everybody knows he had like piles of money hidden in the library, dans sa bibliothèque. Je vais pas arriver à parler ce matin. In Siggers, he had Siggers box full of money when he died, all over the place. So he was probably quite rich in a way, but he used to be much richer in the 30s. In the 30s, he had like 2 studios. He had a house in Saint-Germain-en-Laye. He had a beautiful car. And I mean, the fashion system, the fashion photograph he became was really famous and very rich. So I wouldn't say he was not a good businessman. I think.
But I think you wrote in the introduction of the catalog that in the 50s, he tries to promote his creation from the 30s, right?
Yeah, because he began when he arrived in Paris, a little bit later. It's in the 60s. So he began to promote his work. That's why, he chose like maybe 80 photographs, always the same, to publish and to show everywhere. So that was a very pragmatic choice, because if you show always the same thing, people get used to it. And this is how he became really famous. So the exhibition at the Bibliothèque Nationale in 62, and then the Photokina in 61, I think, and all these shows that were in the 60s and then 70s, it was always the same works that were shown. This is
what does the art market want today? what is the most valuable in terms of the work of Man Ray today?
It's always the same works, you know. If for example, if you had the violon d'Ingres, it would cost like probably 5 million, and so, but it's not going to be able. It's going to be possible because there's only one, and it's in the Centre Pompidou, so it's not for sale. So, but people want this image, you know, because this is like the only one that everybody knows. Even the people who don't know Man Ray know this image. Glass Tears, for example, or Black and White, or all these images are, and Christie sold one like 2 years ago or a few years ago, more than 2.5.
But there's a big gap between the vintage one and the more modern, right?
Yes, of course, because you have, as I said, you know, he printed a lot of works in the 60s and 70s. So if you want to buy a Man Ray, you can always buy a Man Ray from the 60s and 70s now, but it's not going to be the same price, of course.